Here he goes again. That's huge. That's on the roof.
Welcome to Dean at Stumps, the cricket encyclopedia.
The Sri Lankans are stunned. The Zimbabweans are jubilant. Look what that means to them. The first ever series victory against Sri Lanka.
Hello and welcome to the Dean at Stumps podcast with me, Dean du Plessis. Now, this week's guest is an absolute ripper, as they would say in Australia. He was part of the 1999, 2003 and 2007 World Cup winning teams. He was a man who revolutionized wicket-keeper batting whenever he came out to the crease, be it in one-day format or test format. I am, of course, referring to Adam Gilchrist, the Australian or the former Australian wicket-keeper batsman. Well, I caught up with Gilly, and one of the first questions, or the very first question that I did ask him, was the magnificent innings that he played in the 2007 World Cup final when he literally squashed Sri Lanka. So what do I mean when I say that Adam Gilchrist squashed Sri Lanka? Well, let's hear it from the man himself.
Yeah, I guess you're referring to the squash ball that was in my batting glove pretty much throughout that whole tournament. It was something, a training device that I was using for probably about 10 years. The batting coach that I had in Australia, a gentleman by the name of Bob Muleman, who played first-class cricket himself. His father played one test for Australia, and Bob's son played state cricket. So it's a very strong cricketing family, and Bob used to get me to put this squash ball in the bottom hand of my grip, so my left hand, basically to take the sort of fingers off the bottom of that hand off the bat a little bit, and it just basically was just a little form of resistance so that you couldn't put your whole hand around the bat grip. Use your thumb and your forefinger to sort of guide the bat, but then if I gripped too heavily with that bottom hand, I used to lose a bit of shape of my stroke and sort of drag to the leg side, which a lot of left-handers do anyway, but that was pretty much it. So it was just a fine-tuned technique, I guess, instrument, if you like, in training, but I'd never used it in a match. And then just before I left to go to that World Cup in 2007, I was late heading over there because I'd stayed behind for the birth of my of our third child, Archie, and I went literally from home, having got Mel, my wife, and Archie settled back in at home a few days after the birth. I literally went from home to the cricket net with Bob and had one last hit, and then went from there to the airport. And as I left, he said, "You should use that squash ball in the tournament because over there the conditions will be, a bit slower and lower in the West Indies, and it'll help with your technique." And he said, "And if you do, I want to see you when you score 100 in the World Cup final. I want you to prove to me you've got it in there." So, amazing. So that was it. I didn't tell anyone that I was using it. I had a pretty steady tournament. Couple of 50s, but nothing really big. Matthew Hayden was doing the bulk of the run scoring for us, and then I finally got into the final and used it and finally got the 100.
And I'm going to take you back 20 years now to the 1999 World Cup, which was obviously in England, where it's going to be now. Initially, the team started off a little bit shakily. You lost to New Zealand in your group games. And there were a couple of what I thought were very strange decisions, like, for example, Glenn McGrath not opening the bowling. And fortunately, that was rectified as the tournament continued. And then you found your form just at the right time because you were having a little bit of a tough time at the top of the order, but found your form when it really mattered. And especially in the final, you got a half century, if I remember correctly, against Pakistan to steer the Aussies to a very comfortable win. But just talk us a bit through that 99 World Cup, because there was a time when people were a little concerned that you might not progress to the Super Sixes, which of course you did eventually.
You're spot on. We were struggling at the start. We'd come off a tour of the West Indies. It was a test tour that Australia eventually won 2-1, but of course it was tied 2-2, I think it was. Yeah. But held the trophy, retained the trophy. But it was the tour where Shane Warne was dropped. So he was he had his sort of nose out of joint and was, for Shane Warne to be dropped, it was something he'd never ever had to consider before, really, since really establishing himself. So he was at a bit of a crossroads mentally about everything, coming back from injury and then getting left out of the Test team. So we had a bit of that drama around as we came over to the World Cup after drawing a series in the one-day component with the West Indies 3-all. And you're right, New Zealand beat us, Pakistan beat us, and the only victory we achieved in the first 3 games was against Scotland, and that was only just. So we weren't chock full of confidence, but from that moment in time, we knew we had to make a few changes of just tidying things up. I think we just got a little bit complacent, not expecting results, but just little simple things like punctuality and what you were wearing at a team function and did you have the right gear on. And we just got sloppy in all those disciplines that we were renowned for being quite controlled in. So, and the other thing we had to change was we realised that it was a bad tactical error. It wasn't necessarily bad, but it didn't work to save Glenn McGrath to later in the innings. He needed to be out there with the new ball applying pressure straight away. So the thought was Damien Fleming, the swing bowler, Adam Dale, who a lot of people may not remember Adam, but he was a fine swing bowler, but a medium pace swing bowler, and we thought he'd have more effect with a new ball, but as it turned out, we needed Glenn to be the spearhead at the front there, and we made that adjustment. And we had to win 7 in a row, really. We could not lose one more game at any stage, otherwise we're out of that World Cup, and we managed to pull that off and just gain momentum. And then, we had all the drama against South Africa in the semi-final and then played the perfect match in the final. And you were very generous in saying that I was struggling a little bit through the tournament. I had a shocking tournament personally, but finally got to 50 in the final. So that's what everyone remembers, the final, don't they? But no, I was having my challenges at the top of the order. It was a World Cup where ball dominated bat predominantly, and that did make for some very interesting games.
Do you? That's a good point that you bring up. Do you feel that perhaps now we may see the bat dominate the ball a bit too much? I mean, we all love to see, Chris Gayle or Joe Root or anybody plunder boundaries and score their runs quickly. But is there now a danger of the ball now completely being overshadowed by the bat, and that it becomes a bit too boring?
Yeah, I think there's a danger of that. I'm hoping that the wickets in England. I hope we see a bit of a variation up and down the country. So clearly, many teams going to Trent Bridge at Nottingham. I mean, England have set the world record score there against Australia 12 months ago. Prior to that, they had they've scored 400 there, regularly, and other teams will be capable of that. It's a beautiful wicket, beautiful fast outfield, small boundaries in certain parts. But let's hope that other wickets, hope that Edgbaston can provide something that offers a bit more, or maybe Old Trafford, and Lords is always a nice sort of sporting wicket. So, yeah, I'd like to see some variations. I hope it's just not a sort of a set and forget that it's going to be 350 to 400 bash around. So with that in mind, I think, everything's a little bit slightly too favoured to the batting at the minute. And I think generally across the world, that's because more of the rules and we've got to keep tinkering with it, keep playing around with it. I don't have the perfect solution, and I have no drama with the ICC just trying to get the balance right. But I do think the team that executes their bowling plans better than the others, they're the ones that are going to win. It's going to be a bat-a-thon, and the team with the most potent bowling that can really get that plan sorted and delivered will be holding the World Cup up at the end.
Who in your mind at this moment has the best bowling attack?
Well, England is, now with the addition of Jofra Archer, they're starting to get a really balanced lineup, and I think guys like Rashid Khan and Moeen Ali with the spinning roles are playing a huge part. I think a lot of the dangerous teams do possess a world-class spinner. India always have spin at their options, and of course South Africa with Tahir, and I think in that area is probably, if you look at the Australian bowling lineup, that the focus goes straight to the quick bowlers. And we have wrestled with our spin options for a number of years now, but just in the last 9 months, a lot of confidence has been instilled or gained by Adam Zampa from the fact that he's been instilled as the first pick spinner and he's been given a good run at it. So he and if Nathan Lyon plays, I think Zampa will feature more than Nathan Lyon, certainly at the start of the tournament. But if they can combine well, they'll provide the Australians a very, very strong chance. I think even in amongst all the turmoil of the last 12 months, Australia, funnily enough, should be considered one of the favourites. England are the standout favourite at the moment, but I think Australia have every capability of winning this tournament, particularly now that everyone's back and it's a strong squad to pick from.
But it's amazing, Gilly, how suddenly Australia started getting it together on that tour of India. They lost the first one-day international, and the next thing they just came storming back and played cricket that was very synonymous to the way that incredibly all-conquering team of yours, would go about their business. I mean, what would you put that down to?
Yeah, look, I think it's the first thing was that they were able to get out of Australia. I think the team, the squad, certainly the coach, a new coach for the first home summer of his coaching career, Justin Langer, just found the level of focus and scrutiny and opinion on them had gone to new levels, and it was always going to be that case, given that the dramas around the whole sandpaper gate and the bans of the players, the fact that in Australia for the first time ever we had two new broadcasters, Channel 7 and Fox Sports, rather than just one broadcaster at each game. There's you double everything, you doubled the interviews, you doubled the time that you had to prepare before game for the media and so on. So there was a lot of scrutiny. So they found that challenging, and obviously they lost to India in the Test series and lost to South Africa at the start of the summer in the one-dayers, but then getting out of the country, and ironically to one of the most populous countries in the world, and certainly in the cricket playing world, the one with the most people in it and cricket lovers, into India. But I think they found themselves in their own little bubble, away from the spotlight, almost feeling like they were getting away from it. So I think that primarily then allowed all the things that Justin's been working on as a mentor and a coach, and putting in the foundations of planning and building the team environment that he was hoping to create. I think they just picked up on that and that was allowed to sort of organically grow without being intimidated by the focus around them by the Australian public and media. And then they just got on a roll, and, just all about momentum. And I think now with Smith and Warner back in the equation, there'll be a global focus on those guys as they hit the World Cup. But I think the Australian cricket team has dealt with that already, and they'll be ready to play cricket rather than be looking backwards. I remember the night before 2003 World Cup beginning, Shane Warne came to us and it was revealed to us as a team that he'd obviously tested positive to a banned substance and was going to have to leave the tournament. We spent all afternoon and all night dealing with that as a team and really confronting it openly and honestly. And I'm really glad we did. That was great leadership from Ricky Ponting and John Buchanan, because the next morning when we turned up to play Pakistan in a World Cup match, whereas the rest of the world, it felt like, were just totally blown away by the biggest news in cricket, probably, or some of the biggest headlines ever that you'll ever see about one of the best players ever being involved in a negative drug test. So we were already focused, and I think Australia has dealt with the Smith-Warner thing now. They're ready to play cricket. Yeah,
that makes sense, and the way that Australia bounced back is exactly why they are the team that they are and that they have been over the last many decades, really. But I want to move a bit more and focus on you, Gilly. First of all, how did you get the nickname Churchy?
Churchy, that's a simple one. Yeah, it's walking around the ground in 1997, which was my first Ashes tour, my first full tour with the Australian team. I'd sort of been flown in a couple of times prior, but I was the last person picked, really. You need a reserve wicket keeper. Ian Healy was the incumbent, and I was there to learn and do all the jobs that the reserve players do. But walking around the ground at Bristol with Steve Waugh and Glenn McGrath, and a young kid came running up with his sort of book tour booklet, and he was really nervous because he's got, there's a high-profile legend of Steve Waugh in front of him. He says, Steve Waugh, and he's fumbling through the book. Can you sign this? And then he looks, Glenn McGrath. He couldn't believe Glenn McGrath, and then he looked at me, and he had no idea clearly who I was, and he fumbled through his book. He said, "Oh, are you Eric Gilchurch?" So that was it. The only two blokes that heard it was Steve Waugh and Glenn McGrath, and they suitably let the rest of the team know. And it's funny, you've got sort of standard nicknames, but it's probably within teams where the real nicknames are given, and a lot of people don't know about them because usually they're kept pretty tight within a team. But yeah, that was it, Churchy.
Gilly, you had the privilege of captaining the Australian Test team in a series against India. That must have been 2004.
Yes.
And not only did you captain the team, you were successful, as a team, in actually beating India in India, which must have been absolutely wonderful, because the last time you toured India was back in 2001 with the whole Harbhajan Singh, the way that he was able to bounce back, and India were able to bounce back. 3 years later, you're the captain, and you and the team are able to, I guess, hand down a bit of retribution and set the record straight again in terms of winning a series in India. That must have been very special for you.
Yeah, very, very satisfying. The highlight of my career, I think, from a collective point of view, I guess three World Cups in a row might take some beating, but as a group. But I think for that group of players over a sort of a 4 or 5 year span, starting, as you say, back in 2001, Steve Waugh leading us through to 2004, 2005. So the group of players that played through that little period, it just became sort of the holy grail. At 34 years, Australian teams have been going to India without success in Test cricket. So it was extremely satisfying, a lot of planning, a lot of learnings from 2001, where we were dominant in the first Test, dominant in the sort of 2 out of the 5 days in Calcutta, or 3 maybe, and then they turned it around, and that was just world-class cricket from India in 2001. So we had a lot to take away and learn about being in India and our tactics primarily. And then Ricky Ponting broke his thumb just before the tour, so all of a sudden I'm captain and a bit nervous because I had a few personal demons from the previous tour, but I think that was the best thing for me. It allowed me to focus on others rather than myself. And I must say, we went negative to be positive. We went against the grain of Australian cricket's sort of usual mentality of attack, and we had to defend and just swallow our ego a little bit. And really Damien Martin and Darren Lehman in particular were brilliant with the bat. There was a good, solid batting unit all round, but those two they stood out, and Simon Kadich as well. But then the bowling unit, really, they were the ones that won it for us. When you got McGrath, Gillespie, Warne and Kaspavic primarily, that was just just brilliant. And the quick bowlers, Warney was almost playing the support act in just tying up an end, and the quick bowlers just kept coming in, and they're the big fast bowling cartel, they call themselves, and good reason. They just stick together, get the job done, and just go about their business without too much fuss.
And in 2005, that was, from an Australian perspective, very disappointing. You got to England, unfortunately for Australia, lost the Ashes, made for wonderful cricket around the world, though, in terms of cricket lovers around the world, because it was a bit of a seesaw affair. Obviously England arriving in Australia in 2006, many people felt that they now finally would have gained the momentum to beat Australia in Australia, but that was definitely not to be. I want to talk about the 100 that you scored when you were recovering from what you describe in your book as a lot of personal problems. I remember reading a snippet in your book saying that you allowed yourself a good cry at one of the games. You went out to bat, and I remember Mark Taylor being on air, listening to that on television, Mark Taylor being on air, and the first six that you hit of Monty Panesar, Taylor saying something on the lines of, "Sounds good, is good." And I'm sure as a batsman, you get the feeling that, you know what, this is going to be my day today. But for me, sitting in my lounge room and my living room and listening to this, I just got the feeling Gilly's going to do something so very, very special today, and you did.
Yeah, it's probably the most spoken about innings of my career, where people talk about it and talk about listening to it or being at the ground or watching it on TV, which is nice because, people say, is that your best innings? I say, well, it wasn't my best innings, it was my most fun innings, because I'd become a bit trapped in the sort of psychology of the game, and I was a bit down and out, and even ironically sort of 11 years into an international career, I was probably harbouring a lot of self-doubt, which seems a bit crazy, but for whatever reason, I sort of lost the fun aspect of the game, and I went out there, and first ball, I reckon it was, against Andrew Flintoff, funnily enough, I sort of hit one uppishly through gully region, but there was no gully fielder there. It sort of hit a gap and went for four. Could have been a big different story, but next ball I played exactly the same ball, a similar way, but in a better position, and creamed it off the back foot for four. And I just suddenly, they say the old adage, something just clicks eventually if you just trust it and believe in it and keep working hard, which is primarily the most important ingredient. And it clicked. It came out of the middle, and I just remembered what it was like, that beautiful, fun feeling of hitting the ball out of the middle of the bat. And then, it was a hot day. We'd already had a good lead, and I just thought it's time to enjoy this and have some fun. So, it was exactly, that's what my memory is when people ask me about that innings. It was fun.
So you say it wasn't your best test innings, it was the innings you had the most fun. What, in your mind, was your best test innings? Which one would that be?
I think there's probably two. One of them, and people are a bit surprised by this too. One's not a very well-known one. Well, I scored 100 in Bangladesh, in Chittagong, which not many people, certainly in Australia, probably were even watching it. Everyone just thought the Aussies will go to Bangladesh and smash them over there. But we were in all sorts of trouble. They'd scored close enough to 350, I think, from memory in the first innings, and then we were 5 for about 120, maybe even 6 for 120, and struggling to avoid the follow-on. So, I just felt like it was the longest innings of my Test career, I think. Certainly my slowest 100. And we still fell short on first innings. They still knocked us over short of their total, but we were able to then bowl them out in the second innings, and we chased 300, which was no easy thing in the subcontinent against any team. But Ricky Ponting scored a great 100. I reckon if I missed out there, that would have been the first time we lost a Test match to Bangladesh. That's back in 2005, 6, somewhere around there. So it was a while ago. But I think that one, and I got 49 in a second innings against India in Chennai in 2004 on that tour that we just spoke about previously. Again, everyone goes, what, 49? That can't be one of your best. But in the context of that series and the history of Australia going over there, I actually took the liberty of promoting myself to number 3 in the order in the second innings in Chennai, and try to erase a deficit that we gave up on the first innings a little bit quicker than what we might have approached it. And when I got out, we had eliminated we started to build a lead, and it ended up a drawn match. It got washed out, but I reckon that was really, really crucial in getting that game deeper and deeper into days 3 and 4. Otherwise, we might have been all over before the rain came.
Adam Gilchrist, what an incredible human being. Thank you very much indeed for listening to the podcast. And don't forget that you can maybe perhaps tell your friends or family members to subscribe to the YouTube channel. You just search for Dean du Plessis, hit the subscribe button, and you will see interviews with the likes of Gary Kirsten, Alan Donald, Jason Gillespie, Dave Houghton, Andy Flower, and of course this great man, Adam Gilchrist. Well, of course, the World Cup is around the corner. It'll be wonderful to hear who you think will do well and who you believe may not do as well as people would have predicted. But until next time, thank you for listening and goodbye.